Welcome to the LawyerFair.co.uk daily podcast. LawyerFair helps businesses find the right lawyer at the fairest price. But on this podcast, we just chew the fat with some great guests.
So here we are. It is the LawyerFair Daily Podcast. Once again, welcome. My name is Andrew Weaver. I'm the CEO of LawyerFair.co.uk. And today I am chatting with, I have to, in the spirit of disclosure, and we are all about transparency at LawyerFair, I have to announce that I've known this chap for a while, and it had nothing to do with the conversation we are having today, because Rob Benfield is our guest today, and he was formerly a five-a-side football colleague. Welcome, Rob.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Andy. Yeah, and I remember a few challenging games against yourself.
Well, I was known for the occasional robust challenge, Rob. It is fair to say, but I've almost kind of knackered myself out of the game now, I think, with doing a few too many of those. But Rob, thank you for joining us. I know that you've had an extraordinary month or two with the first baby, move of house, and also the business that you're doing is taking off as well. So just give us a little bit of background. Rob, just as an introduction, is head of Fair Business Loans, a not-for-profit organisation providing financial support for businesses. But Rob, just give us a more detailed intro as to what you do.
Yeah, so I mean, I am head and actually set up and run Fair Business Loans, which is the business lending arm of a larger organisation called Fair Finance, and it is a social not-for-profit business, and the mission or the vision of what Fair Finance provides that runs throughout business loans and also other services that we provide is a mission to really revolutionise the financial services market, to make sure that everyone has a chance to access the financial services that they need or are looking for. And so Fair Business Loans specifically provides lending to businesses that struggle to access the full financial lending that they require from their bank. And we're focused solely on small businesses. We're not interested in actually servicing larger businesses that have more options. And we lend between £2,000 and £20,000 to businesses turning over between about 50,000 and 2 million a year. And we're sort of a one-stop solution. If we're unable to support the business with their requirements, then we often refer them to, they've been trading less than 2 years, to people like Startup Loan Scheme. And we also work in conjunctions with a lot of the banks. We have a partnership with Metro Bank where they refer us clients they're unable to lend to. But really, we're all about serving as many businesses as possible. And we started off lending in London, but now lend to businesses all across the UK. In fact, we've just approved a loan to a dentist in Aberdeen. So, last week there was one in Crewe. They're all over the UK, really. We're now working with businesses.
Well, Rob, thanks for the intro. And I think one of the key areas that I wanted to address here, or certainly the initial area, is that clearly a key pillar of your business model is ethical lending, and you are working in a what you've quite rightly framed in the notes beforehand as a kind of Wild West unregulated market where bad practice, I'm afraid, is fairly regular practice with certain operations. Just talk us through a little bit of that kind of the landscape in which you're working in, and the landscape, frankly, that small business owners have to negotiate sometimes.
Yeah, well, when we first set up Fair Business Loans, I thought the main thing we were looking to tackle was to provide financial services to people that couldn't access it. Which is one issue. What we've actually found is we're also tackling a second issue, which is we're working in a very, as you say, the Wild West of a market in lending to small businesses, and I'll explain why that's the case, and also come on to what to look out for or avoid if you're a small business in a bit. Basically, probably a lot of people have seen in the press over the last 2 years a lot of negative press and changes in regulations around the consumer finance market. So you've seen, Wonga and doorstep lenders such as Provident. There's others, Speedy Cash. There's all sorts of consumer lenders that were really using practices to take advantage of people that weren't able to access financial services from their banks for whatever reason. And what's happened on that side is actually regulators have tightened up, and there is now a lot better regulation, and there is also, a legal basis around the Consumer Credit Act that protects consumers from borrowing personally. So in the consumer market, you will see that everyone has to publish representative APRs, which mean you can compare the cost of loans. There is a restriction on people using things like continuous payment authorities that will clear out your bank account. They'll keep trying to hit it on a daily basis and take out whatever's there. And also lots of other practice around hidden charges and fees where you end up paying a lot more than you originally sold the product. So on the consumer side, on the personal lending side, things in the last couple of years have had a lot of coverage and have been tightened up. Where there is really a loophole, and which is really what affects small businesses and any small business out there looking to borrow, is that there is no Consumer Credit Act protecting really the sole traders and also small limited companies out there, which means that a lot of the companies or a lot of the lending that we see done in the non-bank market from alternative providers has actually exploded for businesses in the last 2 years. And a lot of the funders and the organisations that were taking advantage in the consumer market have now set up or funded business lenders, because as a small business owner, in my view, and all the businesses we work with, you are a consumer. You're not, particularly small businesses, 1 or 2 or 3 person directors running the businesses using the finance. You're not a large company with a sophisticated finance team. And so there is no protection really for small businesses in terms of how lenders advertise to the business lending market their interest rates, their arrangement fees, what collections practices they use. So people will concoct all forms of marketing and contracts for small businesses that don't really represent the agreements that we're entering into.
I'm following every word, Rob. It's fascinating background. And so, I mean, in terms of what Fair Business does differently, or what are the core pillars with which you're trying to reshape and revolutionise this space? What are the key areas that you're addressing?
Yeah, so the key areas we're addressing is one, simply transparency. So we're a market leader because we have a social mission around transparency, rather than being regulated to do that. What we publish on the front of our website the full interest rate and the arrangement fee that the business will be charged up front, so they know what is going to be charged. If you look at anyone else's website in the sort of small business market we're looking at, then you'll find that normally they will quote a very low indicative rate, which is not one you will often likely receive, and usually there will be no mention of the arrangement fee, which once you've gone through the process you'll be told about, or it will be lumped on just when you're about to sign, and then it's very difficult to walk away at that point because you'll have been through the process. So really what we're seeing is businesses not being told what they're actually going to be charged, or entering agreements where it's not clear or easily understandable. And so we offer a transparent alternative. The second thing I think that's pretty key that we do, we actually have a discussion with the business around affordability and actually look at affordability of the loan. So we actually talk to the client. We're not completely automated, and we actually discuss what the purpose of the loan is, and then look to try and match the structure and the term of the loan to the actual financing need, whether it be working capital or capital expenditure. most of the competitors in the small business loan market, commercial ones that lack transparency, also they don't ask what the purpose is. They don't fully look at calculating affordability. So what we often see, and I see this on my desk on a daily basis, is businesses that have been lent to with a loan facility that may be not matched to the purpose and the affordability of the client. And unfortunately, what we see is over time, a lot of these things, a bit like the payday lending market of the personal loan world, they may be okay if used on a one-off basis for the period they're meant to be used, but they're often rolled for a continuous, or encouraged by the lender to be rolled for a continuous period of time, which over time destroys the cash flow of the business and ultimately will see them fail. So what we offer differently is the transparency and also that discussion and advice around affordability and lending responsibly, really. We don't push debt on people. We have a discussion about it. And I think taking on debt when you're a small business is a serious decision because it has strong consequences.
Well, I don't think we should shy away from the fact, Rob, as you kind of alluded to in that last piece of insight, that the wrong kind of non-bank debt can destroy your business, and particularly if it's hiding hidden costs. If there are things that emerge from that agreement that you're just not being made aware of at the very beginning, it could be critical, if not fatal, to the business.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also seeing what's happened is because probably back as you get in a pretty unregulated market where there is opportunity to take advantage, is we've seen maybe 40 or 50 small business lenders start up in the last 2 years, and I'm continuing seeing cases where they're actually the business has borrowed from one of these lenders, is then repaying the original loan of this lender by borrowing through another one, and then paying the borrowing by borrowing through another one of these. And in some cases, for businesses that have filed good accounts, there is almost now an oversupply of badly structured credit that in a year's time, it's an emerging market, in a year's time, I see that many of these good businesses have actually over-borrowed and will, effectively, it will be fatal to that business if it hasn't already been. So it's actually pretty serious. I think in 3 or 4 years' time, you will see, I'm sure you will see government and regulators saying, why did we promote some of this alternative finance in a less regulated way? A bit like we've seen on the consumer side. It's just not many people, because that market is so new and sort of being seen as, oh great, there's lots of alternatives. No one seems to be realising the consequences of that are coming in a year's time.
Well, it's often the case, isn't it? Regulation moves a lot slower than the market, and I think that's why conversations like this, frankly, Rob, are so critical. And business owners need to be made as aware as they can of the tripwires that are in amongst some of these small business lenders, and ways of finding perhaps more transparent lenders like yourselves. You were going to lead us in, Rob, into the ways into how fair business operates, and perhaps the ways to get around and negotiate these issues.
Yeah, so really we start off with just a warning around what's happening in what I am seeing across my desk, and an early warning, I suppose, from someone who really cares about supporting businesses and making sure that they don't get taken advantage of and use the wrong types of funding that will detriment their business. And as I said, that I'm certain, because I can see in the market that in a few years' time there'll be a lot of press coverage and scandals around the small business lending market. But unfortunately, that will take time for regulators and the government to realise what's actually happening. That said, there are, I would just talk about businesses in terms of looking to what the options are for businesses to look at funding themselves. And legitimate or good options for those. I mean, one of the ones that probably everyone's aware of, you can use some of your own savings. Family and friends is sometimes an option for some people, but not everyone. The banks, actually, they have although they have received a lot of press, a lot of that is related, bad press, a lot of that is related to a lot of the investment banking world, and actually for the consumer and small business, most banks do offer, some financial services, bank accounts, some forms of lending, whether it's credit cards or small overdrafts, things. So for a lot of people, using their bank for financial services is actually, they do offer a lot of good things, and always suggest it's always going to be cheaper and better regulated products to take those from your bank. Secondly, if the bank isn't able to offer everything you need, then there are alternatives. Some of the peer-to-peer lenders out there, Funding Night, Funding Circle, do offer alternatives to that. But similarly, if you're likely to be accepted for that, if you're accepted for the bank, so they sort of cover the same market. If your requirements are more niche or outside the mainstream banking sector, then there are alternatives out there, but you just have to be very careful about understanding what agreements you're entering into and whether the product actually matches your need. And actually, I would almost be very careful. There's a lot of providers offering loans to businesses in 10 minutes, which sounds great, but if you need to make sure you've thought about what you're actually entering into, and sometimes entering into something very, very quickly, as serious as debt for the business, is something worth taking more than 10 minutes to think about, which is offered by a lot of these less regulated providers. There is also alternatives, such as ourselves, who are part of the community finance sector, and there is actually different community finance providers dotted around the country, and you can find those on the Community Development Finance Association website. So those are all not-for-profit enterprises like ourselves, lending to businesses in different areas of the country, and actually have a social mission and a voluntary code of conduct, so that you know that there is some, well, they are going to be presenting things in a fair way to yourselves. And really, we're offering an alternative in that market, not to the banks. We work alongside the banks, go to them first, but then come to someone like us if that's not working for you. And as I said, Fair Business Loans is now lending all across the UK to businesses. So give an example, we just lent to a dentist in Scotland this morning, although we're based in London. So we are actively trying to help all small businesses across the UK. But please bear out the warning I've said about different types of funding and different lenders. And finally, I'll just give one tip. Final tip, we're working in with any funder. I think that the two things to bear in mind is be honest and open with them with any information you're providing. There is lots of information out there for people to cross-check these days, and the one thing you do is you start covering over cracks is the information out there will cross-checked, and you'll find you don't get the funding you require.
Well, Rob, listen, that has been a marvellously detailed and interesting analysis of the market and perhaps the ways that businesses should go ahead. I know that go forward when they're getting loans. I know that it's fairbusinessloans.org.uk is the website.
Yeah, you can go on there and you can contact us, even if, we are contactable. There are a team of people here that are available on the phone, so people can apply online, but we can also, if they just wanted to talk about their funding options, they can call us and actually speak to someone as well. That's
great. Well, listen, having listened to that, I think it's a no-brainer that people should be getting in touch with you if they're in that sweet spot that you've mentioned. You mentioned also something called the Community Development Finance website.
Yeah, the CDFA is the Community Development Finance Association.
Right.
They are a variety of providers dotted around the country, similar to ourselves, that can be found there also.
Okay, just thought it would be useful to mention that as alongside the Fair Business Loans. Listen, Rob, thanks so much. Again, I reiterate that the amount of things going on in your life at the moment means that giving us 15 or 20 minutes of funding gold like that was really very much appreciated. Thanks again.
No, thanks, Andy, and hopefully we'll play football again.
Combat on the floor. I can only hope that my physicality recovers to get back on the five-a-side pitch, Rob. But in the meantime, thanks again. That was the LawyerFair Daily Podcast, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the LawyerFair.co.uk Daily Podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, why not subscribe and download each episode via iTunes, or visit us on the LawyerFair.co.uk website.